Now that we are past Saturday's spring game, spring practice has officially concluded in Eugene, Oregon, and we've got about 3 months or so to go until fall camp gets underway. What are the biggest questions for Duck football between now and then? The recent decommitment of Kodi Greene might be another minus in the wrong column for Oregon recruiting. Is this a program that needs a recruiting victory in the near future? This and a whole lot more coming up on That Show Out West.
This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a holy wallawa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon.
Welcome to That Show Out West for That Team Out West. I'm Ted LaRue. What an absolutely stellar weekend it was to be a follower, to be a fan, to be a supporter of all things Oregon Ducks. Of course, locally in Eugene, Oregon, and then across the country and in a town where close to where I grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where the NFL draft was held. You had Ducks all across the country waiting to be drafted. Some didn't have to wait very long. Others had to wait maybe a little bit longer. Either way, a record-setting weekend in the NFL draft for this Oregon football program. A record 10 Count them, 10 Ducks were taken. It is the second consecutive year that Oregon has set the record for most players taken in the NFL draft. Man, the upward trajectory of this program just keeps on climbing, and NFL draft picks might be the ultimate barometer of where your program is. It might be the ultimate barometer of the success and steps that Oregon's football program certainly keeps on taking up the ladder as well. And then how about that spring game? An even 24-20 final score, back and forth type of football game. 40,000 plus in Autzen Stadium. I loved the video that the Oregon creative team put out there of shout during the spring game. There were some shots in there where it looked like you could have fooled me. That it looks like a fall Saturday. It looks like a fall Saturday. For those of you that were at the game, I would love to hear exactly what the energy was like, what the atmosphere was really like within Autzen Stadium. But it looked electric. It was a showcase, I think, for what Oregon football is, certainly in the current sphere of college football. Some big-time recruits on campus. They got to see firsthand what like an Oregon game day is all about. And then they also got to hear out of their ear before they got there exactly what Oregon was doing from a developmental standpoint and the players that were going in the NFL draft to say, hey, if you come here, yeah, you can certainly be one of those names called in a future NFL draft as well. And then how about the Ducks on the diamond? Let's start with Duck baseball. Not one, not two, but 3 consecutive victories over the Oregon State Beavers this past weekend. The previously number 3 ranked Beaver baseball team, the Ducks, now have leapfrogged Oregon State. Oregon is the number 6 ranked team on the baseball diamond in the country in the latest rankings. They had a 13-1 win on Saturday. Like, Saturday was an elite day. The conclusion of the NFL draft, the spring game, and then a 12-run victory over Oregon State just right across the way at PK Park on the diamond. Now, softball wasn't in Eugene. They were on the road in the state of Indiana, but boy, did they dominate. 3 wins over the in-conference opponent, the Hoosiers over there of IU, and then 1 game in South Bend at Notre Dame. 4 victories for softball by a combined 38-13 score. A very dominant weekend for the Oregon Ducks for sure. We are putting the finishing touches and putting a bow on coverage of spring practice and the spring game here on this edition of TSOW. And when you look back at that spring game, I thought the defense really showed just a glimpse of maybe the dominant unit that they could be. And that's where I want to start. I want to start talking about the defensive side of the football. Now, I'm not going to talk about the defensive line, defensive line was really, really good, okay? They looked like a unit that could certainly wreak some havoc this year in the Big Ten Conference. Boy, the secondary, how about those young defensive backs? They looked really good. They not a lot of big plays certainly allowed over the top from the offense in the spring game. No, not those two units. I want to focus about the unit in the middle, that group, the linebacker group, the inside linebacker group right now. You know, there was an interesting opportunity that was available to some of these younger linebackers to get a few more reps, certainly in the spring game, because of the absence of projected linebacker starter Devin Jackson within this spring game. And I think when a lot of people, even I've brought up, that says, believe me, I've said less is more when it comes to the portal. If they take a grand total of 0 guys, totally cool with it. But I thought if there was one position group where they could maybe look towards, it's maybe a veteran piece in that linebacker room. I think what we saw in the spring game, combined with some comments from early in the spring from inside linebackers coach Brian Michalowski, and the comments after the spring game from head coach Dan Lanning, I think there's a lot of confidence in this inside linebacker room going forward.
Well, I take a lot of pride in developing guys, right? And that's, I think that's evident through Jamal Hill, just 1 year at linebacker, now being an NFL linebacker. Jeff Bossa, was a safety, and, he grew tremendously. And then Bryce, right? So I feel like I'm really good at developing guys. If I'm having to go to the portal, what's that say about me as a coach?
We won't pursue anybody in the portal at linebacker. I feel really good about our linebacker group. Like the guys we have. Jerry's a guy that's worked extremely hard, done an unbelievable job, and continues to improve. And when he keeps that as focus, he's really going to be a guy that can help us. But there's a lot of guys in that room that I think can play winning football. And it comes with experience.
I absolutely love that confidence. I love that faith. And it seems like it's not just the linebacker room, but there's been other groups on this team. Defensive line is one, where they took just one transfer, where this coaching staff is putting faith, they are putting trust into the young guys to be able to develop into certainly better players. And when you talk about development, specifically at the linebacker position, I mean, B-Mike really laid it out there. It's like, yeah, we've got a track record for developing players at the linebacker position. Like Bryce Betcher is a perfect example, where last year, you were looking at Jeff Bossa and maybe some others to be above Bryce, possibly on the depth chart. But look what he did. He certainly soared into that top linebacker role, and he's going to be that green dot type of guy in the middle of the defense for the Ducks coming up next season. And they're just looking at these talented young players and saying, there's enough guys in this room where we can make this work, where there's not going to be a significant drop-off from the starters, projected to be, of course, Bryce Betcher and Devin Jackson, to some of these other guys. I want to talk about some of these other guys in the spring game. I thought Jerry Mixon was a little bit, when you talk about linebacker and the depth there, he's maybe a guy that people glance over a little bit, but I thought he made some really nice plays. Same with Braden Platt. Braden Platt is a younger guy. He's been getting a little bit more chatter, been getting a little bit more talk within Duck circles, and there were some certain plays where he read the gap very well, shot the gap, and came up with a tackle for loss in some cases as well. Dylan Williams was the guy that I thought did really well, both in the run and in pass coverage, certainly as well. I think there's a lot of different talents within this inside linebacker room. And now let's kind of talk about the depth compared to last season. Right, going into last season, of course, you had Jeff Bossa in there. Justin Jacobs had kind of been banged up, and it didn't really certainly play out for him last year. And, of course, you have Betcher and you have Jackson. Like, now you compare it to this year's depth. Yeah, I already mentioned, hey, the projected starters likely going to be Betcher, likely going to be Devin Jackson. But then you start to get down into this depth. You've got Jerry Mixon, as I mentioned in there. Kamar Matudi is the guy that I didn't mention in there. I think you can go 2 deep. You can maybe even go 3 deep, possibly, at this position. If what these coaches are saying, and if we're really reading the tea leaves and the confidence that they have within this linebacker room, I also have confidence. If they got confidence, I got confidence. Let's just put it that way. If they got faith, I got faith. If they got trust, I got trust. Like, that's the bit. Like, this time of year, if you have that type of trust. Imagine what that trust is going to be eventually once we get to fall. I think that this could be a deeper linebacker. I feel pretty confident in that this will likely be a deeper linebacker group, certainly, than it was last season. For these young players, it's a lot of the conversations that we've had with other young players at other position groups. Reps and experience are going to be their best friend. Those first 4 or 5 games of the season, if they can get in there, maybe make a few mistakes, maybe make a few plays along with it, build some confidence, have some learning experience, that is going to be their best friend. So they're certainly playing their best at the end of the year. I'm loving what this linebacker, I love that confidence that Dan Lanning said, shutting down the question about the portal linebacker. Well, that certainly doesn't deter my growing confidence and my growing excitement about this defense, that's for sure. There's some complicated feelings right now. It was fantastic to be able to watch this Oregon team go out there for a couple of hours and really see what they're all about, and looking forward to the 2025 season. And I've really enjoyed hearing from these coaches and these press conferences and trying to read some of the tea leaves and get some different tidbits, read between the lines to really see the direction that this football team is going. But now, kind of left with a void. There's kind of a void out there, right? The season ends in January, and then you kind of let that marinate for a little bit, and then you start to look forward to spring practice. And then spring practice ends, and you're like, oh, man, we got a couple of months before this team is going to get back onto the practice field, and we're going to start hearing some things again. So naturally, I'm going to have some questions. Naturally, I'm going to have some things to think about between now, the end of spring practice, and then the start of fall camp. Let's dive into it with my biggest questions coming out of spring for this Oregon football program. Let's start first with the passing game. Where are passes going to go outside of Evan Stewart, DeCorian Moore, and Kenyon Sadiq? First thing that I want to say, hey, that's a pretty darn good first 3 right there. And you can sell me on any order of those guys in 2025 in terms of production. You can sell me on Evan Stewart being the number 1 guy. You can sell me on DeCorian Moore. You can sell me on Kenyon Sadiq leading this team next season in receiving. I honestly, truly believe that. You can sell any one of these guys being number 2. You can sell me on any of these guys being number 3. So I don't know if there's a absolutely clear number 1 receiving option, and that's a good thing. Weapons across the field, I will take that certainly any day of the week. But I'm watching this spring game, and one big thing that I had my eye on is wide receiver 3 and maybe some other wide receivers on this team that could possibly step up, stand out, and have a great performance and really shine and really carry that into the summer and carry that into the fall. And I thought, hey, maybe there's a Jeremiah McClellan's going to have a big game. Maybe Malik Benson is going to have a big game. Maybe Kyler Casper is going to have a big game. Yeah, throw that all out the window. It's a lot more murkier when you have Jurion Dickey. We saw some social media clips of him in the spring. Ooh, all right, 13 is doing things. And then he had a couple of big catches in the spring game as well. I like the way that he's looking right now. Of course, the former 5-star wide receiver. And then you've got Dillon Gresham. He had as good a day as any. So there is literally anybody in this room. We've heard some great things out of Cooper Perry, the other true freshman, alongside DeCorian Moore in this class as well. This is going to be a question that I think we're going to be taking all the way into the Montana State game. Of course, we're not going to know. We're not going to know who's going to be that guy taking reps. And you can sell me on a lot of guys, I think, for wide receiver 3 and even like wide receiver 4. You can sell me on Jeremiah McClellan. You can sell me on Malik Benson. You can sell me on Jurion Dickey. You can sell me on all these. You can sell me on Gary Bryant. You can sell me on a bunch of guys right now. So that's a question that I think as we go through summer, get closer to the start of the season, that is going to be, I think, towards the forefront of a lot of Ducks fans' minds. But I kind of like having guys that I didn't expect maybe have bigger games in the spring game. I think there's going to be a lot of competition, iron sharpening iron, and maybe this room is a lot deeper than we thought it was, certainly. Let's talk about the offensive line. How good or not good is the offensive line. You know, if you're going to nitpick one area, if you're going to pinpoint maybe a weakness of the spring game, you could look at the offensive line. Of course, the defensive line getting in there for a lot of sacks, kind of disrupting some things during that Saturday exhibition game. And of course, when you have success on one side of the ball, you're going to look back to the other side of the football. And I'm starting to break down this film a little bit. I'm starting to rewatch this spring game, and there were certainly some lapses up front of the offensive line. Like, there were some freshmen that were getting beat time after time after time. Even someone like Pancho in the middle had some missed assignments every now and then as well. Now, I think one thing we need to take with a grain of salt is, these are split rosters. So you're not throwing out the starting offensive line, and you're not forming an opinion on the starting offensive line, because this is not the starting offensive line, right? You're mixing and matching other players within this. Now, there's going to be points and times likely during the season where you're going to have to mix and match, not only on the offensive line, but on other position groups, where you're going to have to play with other players, and you can't take that step down, and you need to be able to retain that chemistry certainly as well. So I think over the course of the summer and going into the fall, this performance is maybe going to have some thoughts in people's heads say, what exactly is this offensive line going to look like right now? I look at specific performances in the spring game and the O-line. There were a couple moments where Matthew Bedford just rammed people over. They're going to take spring practice. They're going to take the spring game, and they're going to try to formulate that. I think to really try to come up with a unit that's going to start off and be really good as offensive line one. I've talked about on previous shows what combination I believe is likely to be that starting offensive line. Harkey and World at tackles, Bedford or Iuli over there at guard, Pranon at the other guard spot, and then of course Pancho in there at center. But they've obviously got to be able to figure out, will they have similar issues like they did early in the year last season? The good thing about that is if they do have similar issues, they're going to have time to figure it out. And folks, when you have this many new faces on an O-line, like the O-line, and I've said this before, maybe more than any other group, they need to play as one instead of playing as five. So they need to be able to form that chemistry. I think that's going to be a goal, certainly, of this coaching staff throughout the summer and as we get a little bit closer to fall camp. Special teams. I really glanced over special teams. I'm not going to lie, a lot on this show, but the kicking was not good during the spring game. I've said less is more when it comes to the transfer portal, but kind of hearing Dan's comments post-game about the kicking and about the punting, I think if there's a good long-distance kicker in there, I think if there's a good punter in the transfer portal, I think Oregon could very likely pursue that. Ross James did not punt the football very well during that spring game. 3 punts for an average of 31 yards. There was a missed field goal in there as well. So can't have that be an issue. You got to shore up your kicking game. Now, you don't want your kicking game to go out when your kicker's going out there. It means you're not finishing drives with touchdowns. If your punter's going out there, it means you're not moving the ball. You're not getting first down. So a lot of times when the kicker takes the field, maybe it isn't the most successful offensive drive. And hopefully, specifically the punter, doesn't go out there as much this season. But there's games on this schedule. Of course, in the Big Ten, it's going to be tough to have, score 30 and 40 points every single game. There's a game at Iowa. We know how much Iowa loves to get in these punting battles in early November. There's going to be a game where you're going to need your kick game, so I think you need to be able to shore that up. If this is what we're going to get, what we saw in the spring game, yeah, I think you might need to go out into the transfer portal and maybe upgrade that position certainly a little bit as well. The quarterback battle. Is this a legitimate battle? I saw good things from both Dante Moore and Austin Novosad within the spring game. But here's kind of the opinion that I carry within the quarterback battle. I'm watching both of these guys throw the football, and I'm rewatching the spring game back. I see Austin Novosad, and I see a lot of what we've had with Dylan Gabriel. I see a lot of what we've had with Bo Nix. Like, I see a lot of that really good type of play. And I think, if you had Austin take over this team, I think that this team could still be certainly at least a 9 or a 10 win football team. But Dante Moore, I think with some of the throws that we saw during this game from him, I think he certainly takes it to another level. I'm just very curious as to where's going to be the line. How far is this going to go into fall camp at the quarterback position? But If Dante, and I've believed since day one that Dante Moore is certainly going to be the guy. I've heard some whispers in the wind that say, dude, that arm talent is next level compared to what we've seen with Bo Nix, Dylan Gabriel, and I think you can throw Austin Novosad certainly in there as well. But having somebody like Austin being able to push Dante to that next level, I think is just going to make him better and better and better, absolutely, as well. Defense. I love every single day, every single minute, every single second that ticks by. My love for this defense continues to grow. Just how nasty is this defense going to be? That's a question that I have, because if this pass rush, like we saw in the spring game, is extremely deep, Elijah Rushing, Blake Purchase, Mateo Uyunglele, Tatum Tuioti, Ashton Porter, I thought, made a couple of really nice plays in the spring game as well. He's not maybe mentioned as much when it comes to the edge room. If that edge room is deep, defensive line, where you look at Bear in the middle, Amari in the middle, Terrence Green, Tion Gray, Jericho Johnson was a guy in the middle of that defensive line during the spring game. He was tough to move, and he did a really good job shedding blocks at the right time and being able to make tackles. He was a space eater inside as well. Like, this defensive line, I know it sounds crazy since you lost Jamari Caldwell, Jordan Birch, and Derek Harmon, all NFL draft picks, one of them being a first-round draft pick. But I think that this defensive line is going to be deeper, and I think this defensive line could be better than it was last year. I know that's crazy to think about, but I think that's the world we're living in, certainly for Duck football right now. And then that secondary. Best secondary since? I'll let you fill in the blank in the comments below, because I think that's a serious question. I think Dylan Thieneman, we really saw the plays that he can certainly can make back there at safety. Ife Obadegu putting his shoulder on the football, coming up and playing the run was absolutely fantastic to see. And these freshmen, good luck keeping Naeem Offord and Trey McNutt off the field. That's what I'll say about that. And then I mentioned in a previous segment the faith that this coaching staff has put in the linebacker room. Just how good? What's the ceiling of this Oregon defense? That's a question I think that's going to be on my mind this summer and going towards fall. Man, I am so excited for the summer coming up. And then, of course, for fall, I'm excited to see what's going to come of these football teams. These questions, hopefully we'll get some answers. Well, we won't get them soon, but hopefully we'll get some answers before maybe Montana State kicks off. Maybe what the spring game really provides, maybe at its core, is a glimpse into some players that certainly aren't at the top of your head that might fill some very unique roles on a football team. Humans are overreactors. We are natural overreactors of things. So naturally, when we see this spring game, some folks might say, all right, Luke Moga to Dillon Gresham. That's going to be the combination that is going to lift Oregon football to the promised land. Okay, maybe let's not print the magic Moga or dangerous Dillon Gresham t-shirts quite yet. Maybe let's pump the brakes a little bit on that, but those are two guys that certainly stood out in the spring game that I think could fill very unique roles for the Ducks this season in 2025. Let's start first with Luke Moga. We know, okay, one thing we got to get very clear before we go any further right here, right now. Luke Moga, for as good as he looked in the spring game, he will not be in the quarterback battle. Okay, Dante, it's Austin Novosad versus Dante Moore. That is the quarterback battle. But when you look at what Oregon quarterbacks have had and the skill set that they've had within this Oregon offense over the last couple of years, you look at the skill sets of Bo Nix and you look at the skill sets of Dylan Gabriel. Both of those guys had the ability to boogie. Both of those guys had the ability, whether with design runs, RPOs, or their scrambling ability to get outside the pocket and run. I look at both Dante Moore and Austin Novosad. I think what's great about these two guys is they are a more pure, traditional, pocket type of quarterback. Can they certainly use their legs to get outside and throw on the run? Yes, absolutely. But What they maybe don't have with their athleticism like Dillon and Bo had, they certainly bring a lot more to the table with their arm strength and pushing the ball down the field and creating maybe more of those deep shots, especially deep in the middle of the field, to be able to stretch defenses and really get that explosive option going down the field for Oregon, where maybe it wasn't as prevalent with the last two quarterbacks. So now you have certainly that you're going to add to your offense, but what about the athletic ability at the quarterback position? That's where I want to talk about Luke Moga for just a minute. We have seen very successful teams in college football have special packages for an athletic and a mobile quarterback. You go all the way back to the 2006 national championship season for the Florida Gators. Maybe the best quarterback in college football history, Tim Tebow, was used as kind of a package guy. Now, he's more of a physical type of guy down by the goal line. And, of course, you had Chris Leak as the starting quarterback that year. In more recent history, J.J. McCarthy was used in kind of a zone read option type of look in that 2021 Big Ten championship season for Michigan to be able to keep defenses off balance, where Cade McNamara certainly did not have the athletic ability, among other things. J.J. McCarthy was able to come in a Michigan offense and create a little bit of a different look. Last year's Penn State team with Bo Prabula, look, you had a quarterback, one of the best in the conference right there in Drew Aller, where he could have certainly been your traditional quarterback playing every single down and making every single throw. But they brought in, now that was a very creative type of offense that Andy Kotelnicki ran at Penn State last season, but they brought in Bo Prabula to keep defenses off balance. Hear me out for a minute. Luke Moga in special packages, down by the goal line, or maybe even at other parts in the field. Can you imagine Moga back there, his speed, his athleticism, with Makai Hughes maybe to one side, Dink Riggs maybe to the other side, or different combinations of running backs and other talented weapons back there in the backfield, where he can do a zone read or an option type of look near the goal line to be able to keep defenses off balance. And then when they show it on film, they run it 6 straight, 7 straight, 8 straight times they do it. Luke Moga pulls the football, and he can get it to maybe a red zone target, someone like a Jamari Johnson or someone like a Kenyon Sadiq. Look, I understand that this is not this package type of quarterback thing is probably not the most Will Stein thing or thing that would fit within a Will Stein offense. But I think Oregon is used to having a quarterback that can go out and then can make those plays with his feet. Like I remember last year, a specific play is when Dylan Gabriel ran a speed option against Oregon State. And he kept the ball himself. He ran through the gap, and he took it all away for a touchdown. I think Dante Moore and Austin Novosad, they could execute the play for a first down. I think Luke Moga could execute the play for a touchdown. I think from the quarterback position, he brings some explosiveness. I think he brings some athletic ability to certainly really provide a little bit of a different wrinkle. If you can keep that quarterback athleticism and that occasional quarterback boogie and design run game, and you add on the extra ability that Dante or Austin provide in pushing the ball down the field with their increased arm talent, now you get the best of both worlds, and you're certainly expanding your offense a little bit. Do I expect it to happen? I don't expect it to happen, but hey, just keep it in the back of your head, Mr. San, all right? All right, let's talk about Dillon Gresham a little bit. Dillon seems like just a do-everything wide receiver. Like that's what, when I'm watching this spring game, that's what I see. Like when you look at the body frame and the quickness and the route running of someone like Dillon Gresham, you might think, okay, that is a typical great type of slot receiver that we can working the middle of the field and all of that. But Dillon's 2 plays where those really breakout big plays that a lot of people are going to be playing back through the summer came when he was lined up out wide, right? That one-on-one matchup, that fade ball that was thrown, great throw by Luke Moga. That was a one-on-one fade situation against one of the best one-on-one coverage corners that Oregon has in Theron Johnson. Now, hey, it was a great throw by Luke. There's no question about that. But you got to be in a position for Luke to be able to make that throw, and Dillon was exactly right there. the other touchdown towards the end of the game. He's lined up out wide, runs a very precise slant route, catches it, quickness to be able to separate, and then he uses his speed to be able to separate and take that thing certainly in for a touchdown as well. Like when I think of Dillon Gresham, I think of a guy that could be the unsung hero for Oregon in 2025. He kind of reminds me a little bit of what, remember like those mid-2000s Patriots teams going into the 2010s? Remember Wes Welker on that great 2017 when you got Randy Moss out there and when you got some of these other weapons? Wes Welker was just working out of the slot. He was that annoying guy that was just on a 3rd and 5 when you're, oh man, we gotta stop Randy over the top. We can't let this big play happen to this guy or that guy. Wes Welker annoyingly runs a very precise out route or a slant, and he gets 10 yards on a 3rd and 7 in the fourth quarter, and that drive keeps on moving. Same with somebody, like I mentioned before, of Edelman in that Patriots offense. And like those Patriots offenses and what Oregon offenses have been under Will Stein, it's a little bit similar. I know this, I'm sure, schematically very, very different, but there's some similarities where, hey, let's get rid of the football quickly, let's get it to our guys and let them create. Specifically, that those guys that I was just comparing, Dillon Gresham to maybe the Welkers and the Edelmans of the world, certainly working out of the slot. Translating to Oregon, a little bit later in the season, when you have Dak, when you have Evan Stewart, when you have Kenyon Sadiq, and maybe some of these other receivers step up, when all the attention's going to them late in the game, and you've got Sadiq on the field, and you've got DeCorian Moore on the field, and you've got Evan Stewart on the field, and you got Gary Bryant on the field, and here's little old Dillon Gresham. Everybody's focused on everybody else, and maybe Dak's having a big game or Kenyon Sadiq is having a big game at that particular moment in time. Dillon Gresham just seems like the guy that in a big game could go for like 4 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown, with like 2 of those catches combining for like 60 yards, catch and run types of situations. I think Dillon Gresham probably has a more realistic chance to be an impact player than Luke Moga does in 2025 for the Ducks, but I think there's a unique role for both of these guys within this Oregon offense. I've talked about many times during this show before of how Dan Lanning has done such a tremendous job at continuing to ascend this program step by step, stair by stair on that stairway to heaven. Of course, heaven, being that ever-elusive national championship here at Oregon. You talk about wins and losses. 10 wins in 2022, 12 wins in 2023, 13 wins in 2024. Up, up, and up. Wins is one story that's being told by Dan Lanning's program right now, but another story is NFL draft picks. This past weekend at the NFL draft in Green Bay, Wisconsin, go Pack Go, by the way, is another story that's being told about the ascension year by year by year of this Oregon Ducks football program. Not only are wins being added and ascending every single year, but also NFL draft picks. Last season, the 2024 NFL draft, Oregon had a then record 8 draft picks. Team record, most Ducks ever taken in an NFL draft. This year, they eclipsed that by 2 with 10 NFL draft picks. So back-to-back years in the Lanning era that they have eclipsed that Oregon mark. And here's something, a stat that I saw on Twitter that I think really proclaims where Lanning's Ducks are compared to where Ducks programs were in previous eras of Oregon football, and just the amount of development that is happening right now in Eugene, Oregon. Lanning has produced 24 NFL draft picks in the last 3 seasons. This was on Twitter, as I said before, from West Coast CFB, great Twitter account that covers all the programs in the Western United States of America. Oregon had 23 players drafted in the 8 drafts before Lanning arrives. Dan has eclipsed that by 1 in 5 less seasons, folks. I think right now, in 2025, at this moment in time, Dan Lanning is hitting the absolute sweet spot of his career. I really do. When he came into this Ducks program, He was able to recruit very well from the start. Of course, throughout his career, listen to some of the interviews that he's done. He's cut his teeth in recruiting. He's been a great recruiter. Of course, he did a really good job at Georgia when he was there as the defensive coordinator, and he's carried that over to Oregon. He did it from the outset, bringing in high-quality high school talent. Originally, when Dan came in, hey, we can sell you on our culture. We can sell you on Nike. We can sell you on an opportunity. You can sell you on all of these certain things. Now Dan can go into a living room of an offensive lineman. We know that offensive line recruiting is certainly a priority for Oregon in this 2026 class. He can go into the living room of an offensive lineman and say, we have put in 2 top 50 picks the last 2 seasons. Josh Connerly, a first-round draft pick this past year. Jackson Powers Johnson was a top 50 overall pick in the 2024 draft to the Las Vegas Raiders as well. Not only now Dan can sell that vision that he had when he started in 2022, now he can sell victories. Now he can sell a Big Ten championship. And I think most of all, he can sell the NFL success of some of these guys that he's been able to produce. Because, now in today's day and age of college football, NIL, everybody says NIL is such a huge part to recruiting, but that is certainly a big part. But I still think the end goal, especially at high level recruiting right now, where you're like competing for championships, like it comes down to really 2 things. It is competing for championships, number 1, winning football games, and number 2, how are you going to get me to the league? How are you going to get me to the NFL? All right, making this $800,000, making this $1 million, making this $2 million is really good right now, but how do you get me to that second NFL contract? How do you get me in a situation where I can have a really good rookie deal and then be able to portray that and able to translate that into the second NFL deal, which is, of course, what everybody talks about. That's your big payday. It's not in college. College isn't your big payday. It's the second NFL contract, and that's where everybody certainly wants to get to. And the picture and the path has been clearer than ever at Oregon to get to that level than it ever has. Like, only Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas had more draft picks in the 2025 NFL draft than the Oregon Ducks. It is no coincidence that Oregon is competing on the recruiting trail with Ohio State, maybe for some wide receivers and certainly other positions as well. They're competing with Georgia for guys like Jackson Cantwell and Jared Curtis. At Texas, I know there aren't as many recruiting battles with Texas, but they're an elite recruiting program as well. They are in that stratosphere. There is no question about it. And the more that they can put into the NFL, there's going to be a back-end effect where more elite talent is going to recognize that, and you're going to be able to continue churn out class after class after class, both draft and recruiting at the exact same time. It's reload, not rebuild. Oregon is building a program. They are not building teams. I don't know if you, at least in the recent future, as long as Dan is here, I'm not sure if you'll see a situation where Oregon drops down like how Michigan dropped down, because it was very clear with Michigan that they were building up to a certain point. And once that point happened, Jim Harbaugh was going to leave and they were going to fall off. Maybe they fell off a little bit more than some people like myself certainly expected. And of course, you have the rivals up north in Seattle. You have Washington, right, where they built up to a great football team, and then they fell off the way they did. Those two teams that were in the national championship game fell off to barely bowl teams this past season. So Oregon is not that type of program. Oregon has the Georgia model. Oregon has the old Nick Saban Alabama model, which shouldn't surprise anybody, because where has Dan Lanning learned from? Kirby Smart and Nick Saban. The blueprint that he has taken from the Southeast, he's brought it to the Pacific Northwest, certainly at Oregon. I think one thing that maybe goes a little bit under the radar is also the NFL success. You know, hey, you get guys to the draft. I remember USC had a lot of quarterbacks that would be drafted very highly, but their NFL careers were sometimes hit or miss. Ohio State quarterbacks over the course of time maybe haven't exactly panned out as well in the NFL as they were at the college level as well. Like, you look at these, Bo Nix is a Picture perfect example. You have a guy that was kind of struggling a little bit at Auburn. He comes to Oregon, and it's very clear that in his 2 years with the Ducks, they developed him into the quarterback that I think we all know that he could be to begin with. And then he goes to the NFL and has the year that he did with the Denver Broncos, and he's a franchise quarterback. Okay? So when you look at it from a transfer perspective, that is something great that certainly fits on the wall as well. You look at it from a recruit perspective. How about Troy Franklin? Troy Franklin and what he was able to do under the development of Junior Adams within this Dan Lanning football program as well. And then he had a pretty good year getting the ball thrown to him by Bo Nix in Denver last year. Although he was a transfer. Look at Bucky Irving in Tampa last year. Like, there is now not only a proven development and a proven track record of saying, hey, okay, we can take high school players, we can take transfers, and we can get them to be NFL draft picks, but we have prepared them enough that once they get to the league, once they get to the NFL, then they can have successful careers. And a lot of our guys have successful tenures in the NFL, and they don't flame out, and we don't have a lot of busts. I think you're going to see a lot of these players that were drafted in 2025 have successful careers. I really love Terrence Ferguson with the LA Rams. I'm really excited in that Sean McVay offense to see what he can do, because the tight end position in the NFL, especially those athletic tight ends, Travis Kelce and George Kittle and some of these other guys are getting a little bit more run now. So I'm really excited to see what he can do certainly as well. The NFL draft continues to tell the story of the ascension to the next level of this Oregon Ducks team. I think this next draft, this next season, you could, I think, see maybe the record number of Ducks taken in the first round of the NFL draft. People have talked about Isaiah World. People have talked about Mateo Uiagalelei. Would not be surprising to see maybe Kenyon Sadiq work his way up into that point, certainly as well. So the future is ever bright, certainly with Oregon and what they're doing it from a developmental standpoint, getting guys to professional football. We're doing things a little bit backwards on this edition of TSOW, aren't we? Usually at the beginning of the show, we're headed off on the Oregon recruiting trail in our stagecoaches and our covered wagons. But this time around, we can see Oregon City on the horizon. We're at the end of the Oregon recruiting trail as far as this show is concerned, at least. We're finishing the show with some recruiting talk. All right, folks, we got to talk about it. I was really hyper-focused on the spring game and getting out my preview and doing all sorts of content related to the 11-on-11 on-the-field action inside Autzen Stadium this weekend, that there was big news that I wasn't able to cover. But now I'm able to cover it. And it's the decommitment of Kodi Greene and flipping up to the Washington Huskies up north. Okay, so there's been a good amount of decommitments over the last month or 2 months or so within Ducks recruiting. And I think there's been some jabs, right? There's been Bot Malatalo decommitting, flipping over to play offensive line, eventually committing to the in-state school in BYU. You have Jonas Williams. I think that was a little bit of a jab. Great quarterback, but a little bit of a jab considering that Jared Curtis is out there and that Ryder Lyons is out there. And there's certainly other options out there for the Ducks at quarterback. I think this Kodi Greene decommitment and flip is in the same type of category and ballpark as Tomahini Tupoi. It might even be more so, to be honest with you, which I'll get to here in just a minute. I think, and maybe more so, it stings. It hurts. It's a little bit of a gut punch. Dare I say maybe a body blow. Maybe not quite a body blow, but it hurts. It hurts because of, I think, where Washington sits on the recruiting spectrum. Right? USC, it makes sense. USC down in Los Angeles, great historical program. They got a general manager and an NIL that's really being kicked into gear. That makes sense. When USC is operating at that level, they are certainly a threat to Oregon out there on the West Coast. But Washington is maybe not at that level. We know, at least publicly, why Kodi Greene flipped over there because of his brother playing over there. He's from the Seattle area. He's playing high school football down at that elite school at Mater Dei. So that's publicly certainly what is out there. I think there's some other things that aren't maybe as public that really played into this recruitment and this flip certainly as well. I think another reason it stings. This is a priority position. Oregon is starting to step up their recruiting game a little bit better than it was on the offensive line. Kodi Greene was a big part of that. Like, you felt good with the position that you were in on the offensive line. Okay, we got Kodi Greene committed, and then if we can land one of Iheanacho and Cantwell over there at left tackle, okay, that's a very realistic possibility. But now you lose Kodi Greene out of this class. And this is a class that I feel Oregon and their staff want to sign 2 elite offensive tackles. Now I think it puts a little bit more pressure back on this staff to be able to do that. Because you got Cantwell sitting out there. He was recently RPM predicted by Steve Wiltfong over to Georgia. It sounded like the visit this past weekend might have swayed things back towards the Ducks. But we'll see certainly how that ends up. That commitment is coming up on May 13th. Emmanuel Iheanacho has flipped around. Oregon has been his leader twice. Maryland has been his leader at one point in time. So we don't know where that one's going to end up. I think that Oregon's going to be able to close the deal on Iheanacho, but I don't know for sure. You got Calvin Obot that's sitting out there as well. Oregon fans might not be as familiar with him as they are with Cantwell, Iheanacho, or the now committed Greene, but he's certainly in that upper echelon of a very strong offensive tackle class across the United States of America right now. So I think there's maybe a little bit more added emphasis now to be able to turn up the heat, to be able to land 1 or hopefully 2 of these great offensive tackle prospects right now. We know the timeline that Oregon operates in. We know it's summer, into the season, closing the deal like nobody else can in December. We know that's the plan. Like, spring is not the plan, okay? But I think there's some other schools on the West Coast. We know Washington and especially USC. They see the way Oregon is operating, and they're trying to get ahead of the game, certainly right now. And I think that's a big part as to why they're attacking so hard, so early in this recruiting cycle at this point in season. They want to be able to flip the minds of some of these recruits, throw a lot of money on the table to shut down these recruitments and seal the deal over Oregon right now. I was listening to a recent press conference of Nebraska head coach Matt Rule. He had a very good comment in recruiting, because the Iowa State is going in there and they're taking a bunch of local Nebraska high school kids right now. He compared the Big 10 to the Big 12. That's maybe not as important right now, but I wanted to set it up to make this point. He said, quote, "Desperate buyers set the market." Desperate buyers set the market. That's just something to keep in mind right now, how Washington and USC are attempting to maybe get ahead, and maybe like this specific class, Washington coming off of a six-win season, they really want to try to ensure their future out there in Seattle. There's a lot more pressure on USC considering how those last couple of seasons have ended up under Lincoln Riley, where there's a lot of pressure, dare I say desperate in some cases, to really get ahead of the game. Where Oregon has maybe been like Nebraska in state, right? Where we made that comparison, where maybe Oregon has been the team on the West Coast that has kind of set the pace and been the leader. Some of these teams are trying to jump the line and close down these key big recruitments before Oregon can possibly get back into the game as well. We know May is the start of the spicy season right now. Momentum is a very interesting buzzword that's being thrown around right now. Maybe Oregon has a little bit of a lack of momentum. Other teams have more momentum, but it's certainly something that a lot of fans are talking about. I want to bring in Travis Rooke-Ley from Ducks Rising to talk all about this, certainly right now. Momentum, it's a buzzword. It's a buzzword out there, Travis. It's been talked about, with maybe some other programs out there that are getting some more commitments right now. Maybe Oregon, the last commitment they got, Xavier Larice, seems like a while ago, right? What is your kind of take on this whole momentum conversation, or maybe lack thereof, within the Oregon fan base right now? Do you think that that there is any factor, or is that because when I think of momentum, I think it's kind of a narrative. It can be kind of fabricated a little bit to kind of fit within what someone really wants it to fit into. How do you kind of view Oregon and the conversation with momentum right now?
Yep. Thanks for having me on, Ted.
Yep.
I think that we have to remember that momentum ultimately is like a Twitter message board term. I know in conversations with the staff, momentum is the last thing they think about, talk about, want to create. Like, they're there to make the decision that's financially, roster-wise, process-wise going to be the best in terms of actually signing recruits. So this has become somewhat commonplace for Duck fans, the like spring lull, if you will. And I think fans just have to remember back to last December, the previous December, what that felt like when it comes to the spring. I think this spring is very much setting up to be a time for Oregon fans where you're laying the groundwork for that summer fall push. And I think you can do that when you're banking on the success on the field that Oregon knows they're going to have. Contrast that with some other schools. I think that if you're not dead set on your roster come the fall, or there's some growing pains that maybe you know you're going to have, like locking in your class makes sense. I totally understand that. But for Oregon, when you're recruiting with some of these big fish out there, you've got people lining up commitment dates come the summer and the fall. Like, it makes sense from an Oregon standpoint to make your big push July and then bank on a big season. And if you need to get back into the game with some guys when you're sitting in the top 5 come November, like, I have no doubt we can do that.
Yeah, Oregon has been, and you kind of raised some really good points there. This is kind of par for the course. I don't think anything is too different, right? In terms of maybe there's a few more stars attached to maybe some of the decommitments that we've seen, certainly as of right now. But I don't think anything's too different. Like we've seen once the weather really starts to warm up, once it starts to get in the summer, and then you kind of mentioned this is Dan's the ultimate closer, of course. We can talk about commitments until we're green and yellow or whatever color in the face. It matters what happens, who signs on the dotted line, of course, in December. And the staff, we have no reason to doubt them. Of course, you're kind of dealing with them, and you kind of know what that's all about. So let's kind of move on to this next thing. We know 2 big commitments are coming up. May 5th is a commitment date for Jared Curtis. May 13th, it's been pushed back for Jackson Cantwell. Do you think that Oregon needs one of these commitments to really go their way over the next month? Or how do you kind of feel about these as to maybe where Oregon and the path they're kind of laying for the future here as the summer approaches?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Curtis specifically, obviously, I think the one piece that I would feel a little differently about waiting is quarterback.
Yeah.
Having a quarterback locked in early does make a big difference. I think that's the one thing that can help when you're working towards like building a class. So obviously, having had Jonas Williams committed was nice early on, and having your quarterback of the future. Obviously, we've talked ad nauseum about that and why that happened. But I do think that if you're making the argument of like, we need a guy now, we need to get the ball rolling, I think Curtis is definitely that guy. When it comes to Cantwell, I mean, you've got basically 4 tackle targets on the board. Cantwell, Nacho, Greene, and Obot, who I think is a really underrated guy, and I know the staff feels very highly and thinks very highly of him. So Cantwell is interesting. I've felt at times it was going to be Georgia. I felt at times it was going to be us. I felt 2 weeks ago that it was for sure Miami, and I had almost lost hope. I think this weekend definitely went a long way when it comes to that. But these things are just so fluid nowadays. One day I have a good feeling, the next day I have a bad feeling. Then we're back on board, then we're not. So I don't think anyone who thinks they know where Cantwell or Curtis is going to land as of today, I just don't think is correct. I think that we'll have our best feel probably 48 hours out on both guys.
Yeah, it's you mentioned fluidity, especially with Jackson Cantwell. That one has kind of gone all over the place. Even a guy like Emmanuel Iheanacho, he's had Oregon as his leader twice. Oregon to Maryland, and then certainly back to Oregon. So there's certainly a lot kind of going on in terms of fluidity. Let's talk about it. The decommitment of Kodi Greene. There's been some decommitments in this class that, have you kind of understand why they went the way they did. We talk about Jonas Williams, certainly before. Batmalatalo just going to the other side of the football as well. Kodi Greene, of course, is from the Seattle area. I think his brother plays on that Huskies football team right now. There's been some other decommitments that felt like jabs. This one felt like it hurt. It stung a little bit. Really, what was kind of your overall takeaway on this specific flip from Oregon over to Washington for Kodi Greene?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, anytime you're losing a big time guy like that to Washington, which hasn't happened in a while. Yeah. That definitely hurts, and it's why Greene was one of my priority guys, just because of the competition we were up against. Anytime you can keep a guy like that from the Washingtons and USCs versus maybe losing a guy like Iheanacho to a school outside the conference, I think that's a little bit different. From what I can gather, I know let's just say his group didn't love the fact that we were recruiting 2 other like big time tackles. That's just the reality of the situation. I think there are some parallels there between Jonas Williams and Kodi Greene. That's not to say neither are going to be good players. I certainly wish we had both in the fold. But I do think it kind of relates to the conversation we had earlier also about like spring momentum, allocation of resources, how we're going to go about that. I think it totally makes sense from a Washington perspective to like do what they needed to do to land him.
Yeah,
100%. From our perspective, I think given who else is on the board and when we want to make our push and how things are lining up, I don't think it made sense for us to, fight against those wins necessarily at that time. So I've maintained all along, I think that we'll sign 2 of those 4 tackles. I have no reason to change that today. I know that's been the staff's goal from the start. If I start to feel differently and we don't, I think it's cause for concern. We haven't recruited amazingly on the offensive line prior to last season. And it was super important the way this class and kind of geography shaped up. So I'm inclined to trust the staff. They've given us no reason to feel otherwise. As long as we have 2 on the board come December, we're good. But anytime you lose a recruit like that to Washington, I don't, I get where Duck fans are coming from.
Yeah, it stings because I think the difference with that is, Washington's kind of like we know where USC is going. Like they hired a really good general manager, and we know certainly the history of USC. That's not a program that's going to kind of be winning 6 or 7 games forever, right? Certainly, but Washington I think is in a different boat, and I think that's maybe why fans certainly felt a little bit different. All right, last thing, Travis, before we get you out of here, you guys were on location there at the spring game, having a great time over there. What were kind of some of your big 3 maybe quick takeaways, maybe from just the atmosphere and the environment that you were a part of, and then maybe the game itself?
Yeah, I mean, obviously atmosphere-wise, just Autzen is special. It's special to be inside Autzen. Fans showed out, whether sun was shining, even though we didn't think it was going to.
Yeah.
I mean, that piece is huge, and I know the staff really, really leaned into that and leveraged that. Yeah. I know it was a little smaller recruiting weekend than some fans had expected, but I think it was strategic in that way. So I think that when we get to December, I think you'll see a bunch of names on that signing list that were there this weekend, and I don't think that's any coincidence. On the field, I mean, length and speed and talent at defensive back. I haven't watched the replay yet, but just like watching those guys move and some of those young guys play, I think that's something we've lacked in years past. That was cool to see. And then I think some of the development off the edge. I mean, we haven't had a true speed guy in a few years, probably since KT was here. And so watching Blake Purchase and some of those other guys opposite Mateo, I think has the potential to really somehow have 3 NFL defensive linemen go and yet have that unit, at or above that level from last year.
All right, good luck. I'll say this. I loved Naeem Offord, Trey McNutt, both made plays. Good luck keeping them off the field as well. What you guys, quickly before you go, what's going down at Ducks Rising these days?
Yeah. Just grateful for all the new memberships. Love the ability to meet a bunch of people coming out Saturday. But for those of you that don't know a whole ton right now, like we're offering a really unique membership model. Obviously, your dollars going directly to things we're talking about right now. Dan trying to sign, some of the best players in the country, and they can't do that without your support. So beyond the money, helping the program you love, we're offering a membership model that we feel like benefits fans, live interviews with players, connection to the program, the best intel in terms of, who's looking good in practice, who's not, where are we setting up with recruits on the trail, et cetera. So really encourage fans to just give us a try at ducksrising.com, and grateful for you, Ted, and grateful to be on.
Travis Rooke-Ley, the first two-time guest in TSOW. Thanks for coming on today.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Ted.
Big shout out, big thank you to the Director of Content at Ducks Rising, Mr. Travis Rooke-Ley, for joining me here today. Big show, great show, long show here of TSOW, but we continue pressing on, and now my brain's really going to get worked on content ideas, hopefully bringing in more guests, maybe some more long-form interviews. So leave those in the comments below who you would like to see on TSOW, and we'll see if I can swing it. All right, folks, until next time, I'm Ted LaRue. This has been That Show Out West.